But I want to talk real briefly here, because you kind of got into it a little bit, on the practical impacts of this ruling immediately. And so on gun carry in the United States, right? Most states are probably, you're not going to see any difference, right? Because most states don't have these laws. But in places like New York or California or Massachusetts, you're going to see a new set of rules for gun carry permits, right? And to me, it'll probably end up, as you alluded to there, a lot like what they have in Washington, D.C., where they just went through this process a couple of years before, a couple of years back, and now they have a shall issue law, but it's one that has much higher training requirements than most other states or jurisdictions, and one that has a lot more restrictions on where you can carry a firearm. So is that how you think this will play out?
Well, I think that the where you can carry a firearm question is going to be probably the next big issue. Thomas notes in his opinion correctly that at the time of the founding, there were time and place restrictions on the Second Amendment. And he says there's no reason to suggest there can't be time and place restrictions on the Second Amendment now. And he says, but at the time of the founding, if, for example, polling places were off limits for carry because they wanted to avoid the semblance of intimidation, whereas now we put schools off limit. And he says this is analogous. This is fine. What he objected to was the state of New York analogizing between, say, a polling place and all of Manhattan. Right. He says that is not a time and place restriction. That is a prohibition.
Right.
So that part, I think, will be slowly worked out. And obviously, the first thing that's going to happen is nothing, because this is not as if the court had come out and said, constitutional carry is mandatory. And so suddenly someone in California says, well, great, I can take a gun out with me, right, or I wasn't able to before. People are still going to have to apply for permits. And until they have a permit, they won't have a permit. And if they don't have a permit, they can't carry a gun. So, I mean, as of today, nothing's changed. It's not like that brief, was it 1 day, 2 days, where Washington, D.C., 3 days was constitutional carry.
Because I did it. I carried on the mall for that very brief period of time with the ruling in my pocket.
Right. I don't think that we're going to see much litigation in New York or New Jersey or California over what they choose to do. There will be a threshold somewhere. I mean, they can't charge $5,000 for a carry permit, or so you have to go through 2 years of training probably. But if they do what's happened in Washington, D.C., and they make it difficult, I think that will probably stand up under this decision and under this court's watchful eye. So, what will change? New York, New Jersey, California are gonna be more like Washington, D.C. There just won't be a component there that requires permission from a subjective actor. And then I would imagine a whole host of venues and jurisdictions are going to say you can't carry a gun here. And eventually that's going to lead to some litigation because they'll push it too far.
Yeah, that's probably what'll happen. I mean, DC has, DC's probably the strictest of the shall issue laws out there, because it requires 16 hours of training, including range time with that training, which you can't do in the city because there are no public shooting ranges there. So you have to travel outside. It's a similar thing to what they do with Chicago in Illinois. But it also has these, it has a lot of gun-free zones, of course. They make, you can't carry on public transportation, which obviously presents a lot of problems if you don't own a car. And then you also, they've created special gun-free zones. This has actually happened in Virginia recently as well, and a couple other states are doing this now with permitted events or events that ought to have been permitted. Protests, large gatherings of that nature, you can't carry there, and so you kind of have to. If you see too many people gathering in one place, you have to run away from them, I guess, is the idea. But and then also DC has a special gun-free zone that travels. It follows diplomatic cars around. So if you see a diplomat coming towards you, run away, I guess. Again, now I believe they have to give you some sort of warning before you could be arrested over this,
Right.
but you get the idea. There will be things like that, which will probably be contentious, that will come up in these new laws. But that's what I'd expect the direction of things to head. So
the last thing to say here is that, despite the freak out that followed the announcement of this decision, and a statement from the president saying how disappointed he was, and the statement from the governor of New York, concealed carry really has very little to do with either mass shootings or daily crime.
Right.
It's just not. I mean, really, the only thing that concealed carry has to do with mass shootings is that very occasionally, a concealed carrier stops one, as we saw in West Virginia a month ago. That's it.
Yes.
And with day-to-day crime, the idea that the problem we have in America with crime committed with firearms is concealed carry, it's just ridiculous. The two really don't intersect. And what data we have out of Florida and Texas, it's less reliable from Texas now because they have constitutional carry, but is that concealed carriers are about 6 or 7 times more law-abiding than the police. So, this decision is it's big, but it's not really even likely to intersect with our gun control debate. It's never been the problem. And that's why we've gone from may issue to shall issue to constitutional carry in a whole bunch of jurisdictions, and nothing has happened in either direction. Crime hasn't gone up or down as a result. It's just not really related. And, I think that's something that's worth remembering. It certainly comes up in the decision, because in the dissent, Justice Breyer lists this parade of horribles. He talks about shootings and suicides and crime, all of which are really important things we should talk about. And Justice Alito responds and sort of says, well, I don't really know what that's got to do with this. It's, no one who's committing a crime like that is worried that they can or can't take their gun outside. No one who's committing domestic violence is going to be dissuaded because the rules for carry have changed. No criminal. It just doesn't really intersect. And I suppose what we'll see is an attempt to link it to other events. But this is something that really stands alone when thinking about people abusing guns.